Spring is here, and all this wind and sunshine can dry out your skin, leaving it cracked and irritated. But people don't know that these are the first signs of becoming a zombie. But don't worry, Zombielips has sponsored this video in hopes of bringing you the cure. They've got lip balm, skin cream, and more. As Buffalo Bill once said, it puts the lotion on its skin and becomes a human again. Or I may have misheard him, that hole was pretty deep. Anyway, I've tried it myself and I really enjoy the apocalypse theme and the minty ingredients. You can get yours today at zombielips.squarespace.com, unless of course your significant other has a zombie fetish. In that case, gross, but good for you. Now, these terrifying animals are out there. Some of them mind their own business, others are waiting and hunting. This world is a strange one. Monsters exist everywhere. Some we have documented, some we haven't. Just think about that for a second. What if sharks were unknown creatures? They'd be seen as these flesh-eating monsters. At one point, almost every vicious animal was unknown, so what makes the creepy creatures in these stories different? They might just be animals that are scary looking. Or they could be waiting for you under your bed. Joke's on them, I don't have a bed, but they are welcome to hide in my closet with the skeletons. Anyway, are you ready for some unknown creature sightings? Number 1. It wasn't a bear. Submitted by SKYLER. I've kept this story to myself for a long time because I was afraid that no one would believe me, and maybe because me and my two friends were somewhere we weren't supposed to be. I pretty much live in the middle of the Daniel Boone National Forest in the southeastern part of the US. Back some years ago, my friend's mom had a weekend-long business trip, plus it was summer break, so Chris and Matt, my friends, invited me to come stay that weekend with them. We were all around the age of 14, so we assumed we'd have a nice long weekend of video games, movies, and sleeping in until the evening hours. I arrived at Chris and Matt's house just an hour or so before their mom left. As their mother was getting ready to leave, she lectured us all to not be outside at night, and that her friend would come by later to check on us. We all just sat there in the living room nodding our heads as she talked, agreeing that we would not be out at night, knowing good and well that we were definitely going to be out late. So Chris and Matt's mom left, so we started the night off by playing some games on their large living room TV. We turned the volume all the way up and jammed out to some music as well. Later that evening, just before sunset, this friend their mother had spoken of just came in through the front door. None of us heard her coming over the games, and she instantly starts telling us to turn our TV down, that she can hear it from outside. Then she asked us to clean up a little. Right away we gave in to her demands. That way she would leave sooner and we could get back to what we were doing. By the time she left, it was completely dark outside, so we waited a few minutes to make sure she was gone. Then we grabbed some firecrackers, the ones I had secretly brought, and went outside and began to blow some things up, throwing them at each other, and we may have threw some in the neighbor's garage to see how loud they would be. We weren't the most respectful teenagers. When we did throw a firework inside the garage, it popped and let out an echoing boom. It almost sounded like a shotgun. Then we heard movement in the neighbor's house, and we saw her coming out of the front door screaming. So we bolted into the woods, hoping she hadn't seen us. We took a trail by my friend's house that led deep into the woods. We figured she wouldn't look in the woods this far, and we were right. Looking back, we shouldn't have even went into those woods, and had to be around 10 or 11 at night. It was pitch black, and none of us had been smart enough to bring a flashlight. So we tried using the lighters and phone screens to see the trail, but it didn't work too well. As we were nearing the bottom of the trail, I heard what sounded like a lawnmower or something trying to start. Chris, Matt, and I all paused in our tracks and surveyed our surroundings. "Who would be mowing this late?" Matt said. I should probably tell you that this sudden loud noise kind of scared us. We had been trying to scare each other with ghost stories and urban legends before we heard it, so we were kind of on edge. We were just standing still in the middle of the woods, listening to the cranking sound, just trying to figure out where it was coming from. Then there was this smell on the wind of gas, and what I thought had to be burning garbage. And that's when I realized, and I think we all realized it at once, that this didn't sound like a lawnmower, rather a chainsaw. Already spooked and creeped out, the three of us ran the whole way back out of the trail. In no time, we reached the beginning of the trail breathless and dragged ourselves back to Chris and Matt's front porch. We just stood there panting and gasping for air, unable to comprehend what the heck happened in those woods. We decided we would check it out again tomorrow in the daylight. Still, for another 10 or 15 minutes after that, we heard the chainsaw running. So we just went inside and locked the door, trying to forget about it. It was around 11:30 by then when we started up some more video games. Now, we were three adventurous and curious kids. That chainsaw sound could have just been a weird neighbor doing yard work at night, or something mundane like that. But we quickly decided to go back out on the trail. We wanted to find the source of this noise. We wanted to scare each other, and I'll tell you one thing though. This story is not about some weird chainsaw sound. The noise was simply the thing that got us back out in the woods. When we headed back out, it felt like it had gotten a lot colder. I could even see my breath now. This time though, we brought a flashlight, so we thought we were ready. We made our way back to the spot we were, where we heard the chainsaw sound. We must have been walking for about an hour trying to find exactly where we were. I think we may have gotten a bit lost. It was dark after all, even with the flashlights. Soon enough, we were all regretting heading back out, and we wanted to go back in. We began to hear this noise around us. It sounded like twigs snapping under the weight of something. When we would turn and look and shine the flashlight in that direction, we wouldn't see anything. So I thought we were just being paranoid. I could feel the air getting colder still, and the whole time I felt like we were being watched. We were heading back in the general direction we thought we came from, and the sounds were only getting louder and more frequent. The more scared we got, the faster we walked. Whatever it was no longer trying to sneak. It no longer seemed to care that we could hear it. Too close to us, we suddenly heard a very loud crack, and we all turned to our right to see what it was. There before us, shown by our flashlights in the middle of the woods, there was this creature. It was a very deep black color. So black it must have blended into the woods perfectly at this time of night. I mean, it could have just been standing there, and we would have never seen it without the flashlights. It was standing on all fours, and its legs only slightly reminded me of a dog. But it wasn't that held my attention the most. It was those two bright yellow eyes. They faced forward, like a man. They were close together on a concave face. The creature's gaze froze me where I stood. Even though the thing had 3 flashlights shining on it, you could barely see more than a black mass with eyes. The smell of burning garbage was there, the same as before, and all I could think was, run. We all dropped our flashlights, and the creature moved very slightly, and we ran for our lives. This was my first time actually fearing for my life, a fear that stung my heart. I know we were all certain at that point that coming back was a horrible mistake. We were screaming and running until we ran out of breath. We were close to the house, but not close enough. We needed to catch our breaths first. But that smell was still in the air. It seemed like big waves of the smell would blow in out of nowhere, and then we would hear the sticks snapping again around us. I knew then that if we didn't keep running, we would never get away from this thing, whatever it was. Obviously, we couldn't outrun it. It probably could have killed us at any time. So we bolted to the house, all our lungs stinging and burning. We did not stop moving until we were in that house. We slammed the door and locked the deadbolt, and we put the blinds and curtains all over the windows and double-checked making sure everything was locked. Then we locked ourselves in Chris and Matt's room. The whole night we couldn't sleep. I don't think any of us even wanted to try. But all night we could hear scratching just outside the windows and doors, and we heard what sounded like a deep purring, kind of like a tiger's growl. The rest of the weekend was normal, and we did not go back in the woods day or night. I've never seen that creature again, and I've never heard of anything like it. If anybody has seen it, I would like to know. I'm still very much scared of the woods at night because of that creature. Its gaze will forever be burned into my mind. And of course, we never figured out what made that chainsaw noise. But at this point, I don't think it really matters. Number 2. Creature in the Woods. Submitted by John West. I'm from Ireland, and I lived in America some years ago. My story begins in the southern US when I was a very young man. One day I set out on a long walk early in the morning by myself. Well, at least I thought I was alone. No one else was at the car park, so I took a big breath of air and set off. Now, you should know that I'm a pretty big guy, 6.5 feet tall and built, and this is important later on. So, about halfway through the walk, it started to rain and clouds were forming overhead. I kept on walking though because I enjoy the rain and I enjoy the peace and quiet, but that was a big mistake. About 10 minutes later into my walk, that's when I saw something. It was the most bizarre and horrifying thing I've ever seen. It was standing ahead of me, and I don't think it saw me just yet. It was just up ahead on the path. Whatever it was easily taller than me. It was a big, dark creature, and it looked like it didn't have any flesh on its face. It seemed to have bones showing on the surface of its face, and there even seemed to be loose patches of skin hanging off of its body in different places. I just froze there. I just watched it for about 5 minutes, frozen and hoping that it would go away. I thought maybe I could walk around it without it seeing me, so I began to tiptoe, and that was mistake number 2. I got close to the creature and nearly passed it, but the next time I looked back at it, the thing was right in my face. It seemed to be staring right through me. I shouted Jesus so loud that if anyone else was in the area, they would have definitely heard me. But the shout echoed through the forest in vain. This monster turned around and hit me as it turned. Then it ran away, knocking me down in the process. I stood back up quickly, but my nose was badly bleeding. I thought the thing was running away. Maybe I had spooked it. I rang my girlfriend and I told her everything was okay, and I told her exactly where I was just in case something happened. I told her I'd see her soon. I hung up, and then I headed back to my car. I was literally running back to my car. I wanted to get back as fast as I could. I suddenly heard this terrifying scream. I nearly died at the sound of it. Then I saw the same beast sprint right past me with ease. It was unnaturally fast. I might be slow due to my size, but this thing was just outrageous. It was out of this world fast. Then I watched in horror as this animal stood up on 2 legs. The creases of its body were disgusting, bearing even more bone and flesh with black ooze. Then it began to move towards me, walking on those 2 legs. It was fast before, but now it was slow and deliberate, as if it was trying to tease me. I turned and kept running to my car, but I slipped and twisted my knee, and for the first time in my life, I thought I was a dead man. I remember praying some prayer in my head, and when I gathered the courage to look back up at my fate, I saw the creature still, but it had not moved any closer. It was standing still at the tree line now. It was looking into my eyes into his, and the most terrifying thing imaginable happened next.
I'll see you soon.
It spoke to me, and it spoke in the same voice, in the same way that I had to my girlfriend on the phone. Then, whatever that thing was, it turned toward the woods, and it just walked away. I got back in my car, and I just cried. Years later, I still wonder why it didn't kill me. I can't get its inhuman voice out of my head, let alone my nightmares. That creature had every opportunity to end my life, but instead it simply decided to leave me with one horrific message.
I'll see you soon.
Number 3. The Ghostly Shadow Creature. Submitted by Hannah. I was around 8 or 9 years old at the time of this experience. I've dealt with sleep paralysis many times in my life, and it's never pleasant, but this night was different. It must have been around 3 in the morning when I woke up in the middle of the night to a sleep paralysis episode. Immediately, I began to panic. I mean, when you wake up in the dark and you can't move, who wouldn't panic? But soon I was able to calm myself down. That was until I saw the thing at the end of my bed. It was tall and sitting on the railing of my bed. It was black with no face or any features at all. By this point I was freaked out, but I still couldn't seem to move. I glanced back up and the thing, it started to crawl towards me. Now I was home with my aunt in the house since my parents were out of town. For a couple of days, and she's a bit of a heavy sleeper. So when I screamed as loud as I possibly could, she just kept sleeping away. I looked back up at this thing, and it was right in front of me. It seemed to stare at me for a long while, and then it crawled back to the end of the bed. After a long and terrifying moment, the creature exited my room. I don't know where it went, and I don't really want to, but I haven't seen it again, at least not yet. I never believed in things like the supernatural before this night. I have no idea what on earth that was, but I really need to find out why it was there. I still have nightmares of this creature. I don't know what it wanted, but I feel that it's still here in my house. Number 4. Monster in the Woods. Submitted by BLAKHART. My husband and I were fishing from our boat one night at the lake not far from our home. We weren't very far offshore, but the lake was deep there. We fished at night quite often as you could catch the bigger fish. It was very quiet and calm, peaceful, when we heard the most horrible screaming. It kind of had a gurgling mixed with it. It was definitely the weirdest noise I've ever heard. We're very outdoorsy people and have heard many wild animal noises in our day, but this screaming was definitely different, something we've never heard before. After the scream faded, we could hear something big coming towards the lake. It was moving fast too. It sounded like it was snapping tree branches and crashing through the woods. We decided it was time to go home. By that point, maybe 5 minutes had passed. It was to the shore already. It must have been moving quickly, because when we first heard it, it must have been about a mile away. We did not have a boat motor, just oars, so we pulled our anchor and we threw our poles down. We were trying to be as quiet as we were fast, but in a metal boat, that's hard to do. We could feel it there, in the trees, just watching us. My husband started to row toward where our car was parked. We were only about 40 feet away from the shore. As soon as we began to move, the thing started to follow us. We could hear it stepping in the woods, very loud crashing noises, and where we went, it followed. It seemed to be keeping pace with the boat. This thing, though, it sounded huge. It didn't sound like it was stepping beside the small trees, it seemed to be stepping over them. We were discussing our plan to load up our boat when we got to the car. The creature was definitely still following us along shore. Whatever it was too big to be a person, and too loud. And it wasn't a bear. I've seen and heard bears in my time, and they do not scream like that. And I could hear it walking on 2 legs. Whatever this was, it was silent except for the noises from it brushing over the trees and the branches breaking. We agreed that my husband would run to the car with me. I would jump in and back the car and trailer to the lake where we would load the boat up quickly. We got to the landing and sat there for a moment offshore. We were hoping this thing would at least come out into the clearing so we could see it, but it didn't. We heard where it stopped, about 20 feet from our car. It was very dark, but we could see well enough. Okay, it was time to do this. My husband rowed the boat as fast as he could and hit the shore. We both jumped out and didn't wait a second running to the car. We didn't look around, we just focused on doing this. I got the car and trailer backed up when I felt a large thump. A second after that, my husband was calling for me to go, and I went. We both looked towards where we knew the thing had stopped, but we still could not see anything. When we got on the main road, which was about half a mile away from the lake, we stopped. My husband said he had to fix the boat. It was an expensive 15-foot boat, and he had just thrown it on the trailer in a panic. Since we felt a bit more safe, we decided to fix it up. Then on the way to my parents' house, we were talking about what this thing could have been. Whatever it was huge and powerful. It definitely scared us. We were both more than sure that this wasn't a person. But the speed at which it moved, if it wanted to, it could have had us at any time. Especially when we were getting to the car. After all, it was only 20 feet away. And besides the scream or gurgle, it made no other noise. When we arrived, we told my parents what had happened. They practically lived at this lake. I waited for them to laugh at us or ask us what we were drinking. but I never expected to hear what they said. My mom told us that it sounded like the same thing that they had heard. My dad, who was Danish and very serious at the time, agreed. I asked them what they were talking about. They said it happened about 20 years ago, and they even had friends with them that heard it too. If you've never heard of the Michigan Dogman, you should really look up the song. We found out later that this song was about a creature that was very strong and very hairy, a creature that walked on 2 feet. One of the sightings in the song was about 5 miles away from the lake we were at. 7 years later after this experience, we were camping there with our kids. We woke up at 3 in the morning and heard that same screaming sound again. We quickly woke up our kids and they heard it too. Although this time it went to the lake again and did not come very close to our camper. But we did manage to see a massive silhouette of whatever it was, and I'm more sure than ever that this was no person. Since then, we don't fish at night anymore. And number 5, The Insect, submitted by Liam C. I'm 10 years old and I live out in California. The only thing I hate about it here is the bugs. I have a long walk whenever I want to go somewhere because I live in a sort of isolated area, and I'm not old enough to drive a car, of course. Almost every day I go out to my friend Jake's house, but I try to go when it's still daylight, so I would get there around noon or late morning. But on this particular day, my friend invited me over to his house for a sleepover. I was surprised because usually he's busy with family stuff on Fridays or weekends. I was happy, so I told him I'd be there around 8 or 9 p.m. because my mom did not have a ride for us until my dad got off work. So my mom packs me an overnight bag with a sleeping bag, a book, a pillow, and a flashlight. I was excited and a bit nervous. I wanted to get there as early as possible and not wait for my dad to get off work. I did not want to disappoint my friend on our first sleepover. So I decided I would walk if my mom would let me, and she was fine with my decision. It must have been around 5 in the evening when I headed out, and everything felt peaceful. There were birds singing and the sun was shining. Everything just had a very friendly feel to it. When it was about 7, I was almost there. About an hour and a half later, I was almost there. That might be a long walk to some people, but this was something I normally did, and I really enjoyed it. By that time, it was starting to get dark and oddly dusky for it being late afternoon, and there's no more happy feeling to everything. I got this gut instinct that something felt wrong. Being myself, I forgot how much I needed bug spray. I picked up the pace a little and started getting strangely paranoid. And besides, I did not want to get eaten up by the bugs around here. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's this loud snap of a branch and a thump, and I can hear what sounds like a branch falling from a tree around me. I click on my flashlight and turn toward the noise, and that's when I saw the most terrifying thing I could have possibly imagined. It looked like a giant humanoid insect. It somewhat looked like a moth. In the sudden glance that I got of it, I could see that it had black, massive wings and red eyes, but it stood tall and straight, almost like a man. And that's about all I saw when I screamed and I ran as fast as I could. I was finally beginning to see the light from Jake's window, and something inside of me gave me a surge of hope. So I pushed harder, and I ran as fast as I could. But all that was lost when I got to the porch, and I heard a deafening screech. I heard the dreadful sound of wind blowing from huge wings. I slammed right into the door, not even slowing down. I began to pound on their front door, screaming, "Let me in! Help!" Suddenly, Jake's father yanks open the door, and the creature is nowhere to be seen. I'm looking behind me, making sure the thing isn't there, and I hear Jake's father say, "What's the matter, boy? You're freaking us out." Jake's dad is a very genuinely nice man, but I stood there completely appalled. I couldn't speak. Eventually, I got settled in and told my friend what I had seen, but as you would expect, no one would believe me. My mom picked me up in the morning the next day. I told her as well, but I don't think she believes me either. I don't care what anybody says. I just know what I saw was true. Cryptids or unknown creatures are not some nutjob's fantasy. Cryptids always have been and will be a thing. They are simply undiscovered creatures. I mean, most animals have been one before. With animals changing and adapting constantly, new species will pop up, and therefore new cryptids will always be around. So no matter how many cameras and people are watching, there will always be creepy critters sneaking about. It's just the ones that breathe on you in your sleep that you need to worry about. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send us your scary stories today. We might even feature them in a future video. Just go to darknessprevails.org. Thanks.